is project development process. Okay, project development process. Okay, I already mentioned in my first class about project lifecycle, but this topic is all about project lifecycle again. Okay, so when we start a project, we start with the inception. Okay, the first thing first is basically the inception phase, and then goes into conceptual, meaning to say conceptual design, then feasibility study, planning. But the planning inside here, it is not the planning that we are going to learn in our class. We are going to learn about planning and scheduling construction project. But this planning basically refer to urban planning with regard to the whole area of development. Okay, so it might not involve engineers at this stage of planning. It involves urban planner and people who learn in other faculties. That is kind of planning. And then design and development basically involve engineers, okay, architect, and all kind of consultant, you name it, in order to have um, the principal designer, basically architect, to put everything inside the building or whatever uh, being required by the client. And then procurement. Procurement is everything related to tendering stage. There is a pre-tender stage, and then during tender, and then immediately after the tender, what are the things you need to do? And even tendering also do have process, which we do not cover in our class. You already learned that thing in supposedly in SEAA4113. Okay. Then construction stage. Construction stage basically involves a lot of things going on. Commissioning and handover. This is what we call completion, practical completion of the project, where you will hand over to the client. But before you hand over, there are many things that you need to complete as well. Then operation, refurbishment, and demolition. Operation basically operate the facility that you already hand over to the client. Meaning to say the client will operate the facility, and that will take forever and ever until the end of the life of the project. But before the end of the life of the project might the building might basically getting very old. So before we can even demolish those things, we can do what we call refurbishment. Refurbishment involve repair work. Okay, then after you repair, the building can withstand for a few more years. Then perhaps after that, it will go into another cycle where it's getting too old, where the cost of repair might not be a good choice. So you might opt for demolition. When you demolish, then basically the land is empty. Then it go to the stage of inception again. You might want to rebuild another building, or you want to do a different kind of development on that particular piece of land. So that's why we call it a cycle. Cycle meaning to say this thing will go around and around. How big is the round depend on the area. If that area is basically um, in the city area where you can demolish that building and then totally come up with a new building, you can get the return very fast. Perhaps the cycle gets smaller. Whereas in a different area uh, where there is no need to basically reconstruct the rebuilding, that building, you simply can construct different building at different place. So there is no necessity to do that. Okay, so this is the detail inside what is the concept of a project life cycle. This is just to give you example how to read this figure. We do have client, okay. We do have client, okay, client side. Okay, let me get this thing. We do have client input, consultant input, and then contractor input. And you can see what are their responsibility with regard to certain time frame. Example, Inception. So in Inception, contractor do not come into this place yet unless contractor involved in design build kind of contract. What we are talking about traditional, if you look at the note down there at the bottom here, we call it traditional construction. Traditionally, this is what the process is all about, okay, traditionally. But bear in mind that we do have different type of contract, such as design and build, fast track, and etc. etc. These could be different. In that particular type of contract, contractor normally also involved at the beginning, inception stage. Okay, but in normal situation, identify the need to develop a project, the need to do a project. Okay, so the client try to figure out, to clarify whether it is necessary or not. Okay, to do that kind of project that the client thought that could be okay, and then decide to build. Let's say the client do have a piece of land, okay, empty land that it has been doing nothing for that piece of land except waiting for the right opportunity. Now maybe is the time to develop the area. But then the question is that what to develop? This is where identify the need, decide what to build, procure the land and funding. If, for instance, the client do not have the land, do not own the land, doesn't mean that client cannot proceed with any project. Most of the client do not own the land anyway. So if you do not have the land, you go and purchase the land. You only have money, but then you can always buy land. Okay, so procure the land, buy the land, and then get the funding. Who is going to be the project sponsor to fund the project? Even though you might have some money, but your money might not be necessary, then that's how you need investor, people who invested the money, people who have money. It might be from different countries, okay, where always people who have a lot of money trying to find opportunity to grow their money. One of the best way to grow the money is into the property. You develop some kind of property, you might spend 100 million, but then you will sell that property for 150 million. You see how you make money in just a few years. If you want to put your money into the bank, it will take forever and ever in order to even grow a certain percentage of your money. Appoint design team. Okay, once you are clear on certain thing, then you start to appoint design team, or meaning to say consultant. Who will be the first person that you call? You normally call the architect first. Okay, architect normally always become a principal or lead designer. Then you do briefing. Client will do project briefing. Project brief is normally consists of information, okay, limited information because everything is not clear yet, okay, limited information on what could be the intention of the client. Okay, they already decide on what to build, but then basically the client wish if they want to build a hotel, what kind of hotel, what could be the concept of the hotel, etc., etc. That could be some of the preliminary information, but not so many detail because the client also do not know the detail. So that's why client appointed the consultant in order to help the client to basically what we call clarify more on the scope of work that they are going to undertake. Okay, so the client will brief the design team what could be the intention, and then could consist of a form of contract. You might have learned this thing. There are many types of form of contract, which basically will reflect what type of contract. Contract normally involve way to pay the contractor and the way we decide on the relationship with the contractor. We do have design and build, we do have traditional contract, we do have a negotiated contract. We can pay contractor in terms of lump sum, in terms of fixed price, in terms of uh, so-called BOT. There are so many type of arrangement. Okay, so that basically in such a way reflect how basically the design team will come up with things and later on decide on how to acquire the contractor. Okay, so you see, in terms of the consultant at this particular moment, they already involved. Okay, they already come in because they already appointed. They are going to develop the brief from very brief information that client give, then they make it bigger and bigger and bigger and more information detail out. Study feasibility. Feasibility of the brief. What is feasibility is all about? Feasibility meaning to say the probability. Is it feasible, or is it what we call this project can be done? Okay, it can be done technically or commercially. Okay, so every aspect, either technical or commercially, meaning to say you want to get the return of the project. So because once you design, you come up with certain design, there will be costs associated. If you make the building square, then there will be another cost. If you make the building round, and then if you make the buildings have some kind of curve, everything have their own costs. So the client will basically have to decide. Okay, if you want to do a project with high cost, also can, doesn't matter. The consultant can always come up with all kinds of design, but again, the issue is it the client can accept or not. And then in terms of technical aspect, if you want to design a tall building on certain piece of land, the piece of that land might not be able to take up the load for tall building because it depends on the nature of the soil. So you see, so you wanted to know whether it is feasible or not. Is it okay to go ahead with such design and whatnot? And then next stage, design and documentation. Agree design, cost, and timing. Okay, this kind of design is similar to what you are doing in IDP project. So for new SKAB, you do have two IDP 1 and 2. So what you are doing in IDP 1 and 2 is practicing as if you are consultant. That's why you put the your knowledge that you learn in some of the class into practice. Let's say you do have piece of land, and then you need to redesign the road, the sewerage, building, geotechnical aspect, etc., etc. But the consultant have to design those things in detail. The one that you do in IDP project is just a small portion of what real consultant work. Okay. So even in design, we do have a few stages, what we call schematic design, and then detailed design, and also you need to come up with the costing. Every time you design, there will be costs associated with that kind of design. So the client always interested to know, okay, if you propose this kind of building, then how much it would be cost you. So this is where QS normally involved. QS, even though you might not have the detailed design, but you can come up with the estimating based on many type of estimating. We do have, okay, we do have many type of estimating, even though you might not have the detail, but we can always calculate rough or estimated cost. That is what we call estimating anyway, rough guess. Huh? And then if, for instance, you decide on what we call, you want to use traditional contract, competitive tendering, based on fixed price, you need to come up with what we call BQ, okay, if you want to do this type of contract, okay, BQ. And QS need to get involved again. You do the taking off process, you quantify all the quantity and put them into itemized bill, so that later on contractor can take a look at those things if they are interested, and then they will have to participate in the tender, and then simply put the price, and then total up the price, put their profit in, so that at the end of the day, consultant will evaluate the tender. Okay, that will be the next stage. Will evaluate the tender and propose to the client who could be the potential bidder. But the client have the final say, because it is their money. They have the final say to choose whoever contractor that they thought could be capable to undertake the project. Okay, so now during tendering stage, contractor might get early invitation from the client, and then they will decide whether they want to take up the project or not. So they need to prepare the tender document and then submit for the consultant to evaluate, and then awarded the contract. Okay, so you see, award the contract is basically during tendering stage. At the end of the decision, at the end of tendering stage or procurement stage, there will be a decision to award a winner. Then you see, the contract have to be signed, because after this period is the construction period. Production or construction is the same concept, where contractor will mobilize the resources. You see, mobilize the resource, plan the work, and then do the construction, monitor and then control the work to fulfill the requirement of the client. Whereas the consultant will do what we call administration, contract administration. What is contract administration? You should have learned this thing in construction technology and project estimating, this terminology. Okay, you should have learned. If your lecturer do not teach you, or you basically fall asleep during that class, you go back and Google what is contract administration is all about. It is simply monitor the contractor work, and contractor should basically abide by the term and condition of the contract, what being mentioned in the contract document. And then consultant have to monitor contractor work according to the quality, and then according to the quantity, and then certify the work, the claim by the contractor. The practice of the construction industry, you do the work, and at the end of the day, at the end of the month, for instance, you submit the claim, what we call progress claim, and then consultant have to certify. Okay, let me, okay, sorry, there is a call. Okay, production, construction, what we call, contractor is doing the work right now. This is what we call construction management stage, okay, for construction. And then the client, the consultant will do the monitoring of the construction work for the sake of certifying the amount of money going to be paid by the client, okay. And then the client basically will do the payment, okay. Will do the payment as suggested by the what we call the consultant, okay. Client might not go to the site, okay, but in the case of certain interested party, they might go to the site every now and then, okay. They can basically, that's why they appointed consultant, because it is their representative. Or even they can appoint another party, okay. We call it project management consultant. That is basically project management consultant, as I already mentioned to you, what is PMC? It basically client representative to advise client on many aspects. Even though we do have consultant doing the designing work, but another party can be appointed as PMC. This guy is basically solely will be in the project timeline from the beginning as an advisor to the client on whatever matters with regard to the project. Then lastly, commissioning. Commissioning or testing, handover, everything is being put together because this is the final acceptance of the project or handover. For the contractor, for instance, they need to come up with all kind of documentation, manual for maintenance, for instance, as-built drawing, and then all kind of things. Rectify the defect so that the project can be certified by the consultant representative of the client and then accepted by the so-called owner or client. And this is also when the contractor will get perhaps the final payment, okay, final payment on all the works being done. But bear in mind, there are money being held by the client, such as the performance bond. Okay, performance bond, normally about 5% of the contract values will be held. Okay, and then only will be paid after the defect liability period completed. Okay, so that is basically the whole process of and responsibility of the three major parties: consultant, contractor, and the client. Okay, now this figure reflect timeline. Previously, we see in sort of what we call responsibility chart. This is what we call timeline. Similar to the life cycle, we start with the initiation, the need for what we call whatever project, feasibility study. Okay, feasibility study can be done by the client organization or can be subbed to consultant or company who basically do this kind of service. Okay, this kind of service. So this organization or company, they only conduct feasibility study. They need to investigate here and there and then produce report, and they will get paid based on fees. And then the architect, engineer will do design and engineering design, whatever. They need to produce drawing. They need to come up with the specification, and then QS will help in coming up with all kind of BQ, with all kind of term and condition, because we engineer do not know much about that thing. QS would know. That is basically producing for the purpose of tendering. That's what we call tender document. Okay, tender document. Or when the contract being signed later on, that kind of document will be named as a contract document. But during the tendering stage, we call it tender document. Okay. So after the tendering stage here, then contractor and client will sign that document. That document will be called contract document, because the tendering document might not be finalized yet, because there could be some changes or additional information during the tendering stage. We never know. There could be comment by certain parties, but then only the final one will be called contract document, will be signed, and those responsible party will be spelled out in the term and condition inside the contract document. And during construction, that is the contract that need to be administered, okay, in such a way that both party, client and the contractor who signed that document anyway, will fulfill their obligation if you do not fulfill the obligation, then basically you do not meet the project requirement as we mentioned. Then handover, project completion. So after we hand over the project, then contractor basically will disappear from the project. Okay, contractor will get another project in different place, but the defect liability period will remain for some time. In such a way, the responsibility of contractor is not completed yet, because there is a warranty period that we never know. Okay, that we never know, and then it depends on complaint by the user of that building. So contractor need to come back to repair all kind of problem, and then if, for instance, contractor fail to repair, client can use the retaining fund money, or even whatever money that being held by the client, in order to call other contractor to rectify those things, and then later on the final payment will basically deduct those kind of expenses. Okay, project life cycle. Okay, let me go through this concept. Start with inception, and then feasibility study is there, and then design, development, tender, and then handover. You see, the whole period, a big cycle there. This is what we call project management scope of work. Okay, then we do have a contract. Contract already started when the winner already being declared. Even though the contractor might not sign the agreement, but the contract has been formed. So that's why contract management period is there. And then later on, only construction will begin, but not very short period. Maybe take a few weeks in order for contractor to get start the project, because there are some what we call things that need to be submitted, such as performance bond, insurance, certain layout, certain work program. So that's why during this period we call it construction management period. Then after the period is the project is being handed over, we call it facility management period. You see, so the one that I circle here, project management, contract management, construction management, facility management. We do offer master classes. Okay, we do offer master classes in order for the student to enhance the knowledge, okay, with regard to certain field. And you know what? Fortunately for civil engineer, we can work in all scope of work being defined in this diagram. There are people who work as maintenance engineer during operation. There are many people who work during construction, and there are even people who handle the contract, even though we do have QS. There are even people who do the design, a lot of people, and then feasibility study also. And there are people who focus on project management consultant, PMC. Majority of the project manager and the project management consultant coming from civil engineering background. And then second would be QS. The third would be architect. See, there are people who profession as a so-called doing management things, right? Okay, so the whole process can be reflected in this diagram, for instance. Okay, I do not want to go into that because I already touched on what are the things they are doing during this period. Okay, so you see, this is what we call construction management period. But from this period until this thing, this is what we call project management. The difference between construction and project management is based on the scope of work. Okay, but both parties are being called project manager. So during construction, we do have project manager that work with the construction firm, but that project manager for the the whole project management, we call it PMC. Okay, you can read the Malay version. Okay, now let's take a look at the project development. Normally, when we want to develop a project, we normally have some kind of concept. Architect would basically do this. Okay, the client will tell the architect, okay, I have some vision, wanted to do the tallest building in Malaysia, for instance. Then architect say, okay, we can do that. Architect, everybody will always say, okay, we can do that because money is coming. Okay, but they might have some rough ideas and all kind of thing, even object, symbol can be an ideas. If you read the history of certain building, where do they come from? Sometimes it is out of a very simple thing, household product that we know. But that is the concept of, that is the work of architect. They have a big imagination out of small thing, so they visualize. But then having a concept or having an object by itself is not going to be sufficient. You must make sure that that object, whatever, can be built. This is where engineers come into the situation. Okay, we engineer basically come into the idea of either certain object can be converted into building that can withstand all kind of loading. Our idea or our work as engineer is to make sure the building is safe. That is basically engineer is all about. Whatever building, it could be bridge, it could be road, it could be anything, to be safe. Okay, to be safe to human or whoever use that structure. And then that building will develop into a few stage of development, from just basically a mere sketch, and then later on we could have the skin of that building, and then later on what could be the structure of that building, and then later on if that building sit into the adjacent building, how it fit into the whole landscape. And then okay, this is a better version of the building. And for instance, this building is they call it diamond cut, so-called building, a diamond cut. So this is the scenario of the building, and this is where the building is stand compared to the rest of the high-rise building in Kuala Lumpur, and where the location of the building, and then how it basically benchmark again tall building all around the world. Okay, and if you notice this building here, the shape of the building here, see here, basically originate from this symbol. Okay, so that's why the building is called Merdeka Tower. Okay, Merdeka Tower, because it has some relationship with whatever concept that we want to relate to. So talking about life cycle of a project, there is not many place or area that have transformed into so what we call so progress, transform into different shape of the city in a very fast track manners. Okay, other than Mecca and then Madinah. If you notice it in Makkah, for instance, now they are doing a big transformation, but they have been doing that for many years. They have gone through a few process, and the building that they demolish are basically relatively new building. If you have been to the Makkah to perform whatever Umrah or Haji, then you notice The building that you stay a long time ago basically disappear. Okay, now they are building a big building, but we never know. Maybe in the next few years, even that building can be demolished in order to make it taller and bigger building, because the issue of supply and demand. So I would say the life cycle project in the city of Makkah, for instance, is basically very short. In a very short period of time, they demolish and they rebuild again and again. We might not be able to do this in other places because the issue of supply and demand. Who is going to pay for the project? Okay. Similarly, in Madinah, if you notice this building here, the existing building, okay, the existing building is just maybe 10 to 15 years old. They have constructed, but now the existing building around those things, those mosques, has been demolished. They built a block of hotel that looks very similar, except that a little bit changes here and there, and those blocks are basically accommodated by all kind of hotel. It looks the same. Okay, so they demolished the building and then built a new building. But we never know. Maybe in the future, even those newly completed building can last only maybe 10, 15 years, and then they demolish it again to build a bigger mosque. We never know. Okay, the plan, you see, if you if they are able to build this mosque, then it can accommodate a bigger what we call people. All right. Okay, that is the project development process.